Okay, so I think that's it for all that kind of nitty-gritty technical stuff. Welcome. Thank you to all of you for joining us today on this call. I hope that all of you are doing well wherever you are in the country. I'm here in Edmonton. I'm based out of the Organic Alberta office. I'm the Prairie Coordinator for the Bauta Initiative on Canadian seed security. I guess the first time that we held this call, we did something similar to this in December, where we connected the participatory plant breeding growers from across the country. It was a way to connect you folks because there's, you're all spread out across the country. And so we're doing that again here today. The Participatory Plant Breeding Program is a program that's led by Dr. Martin Entz with his team at the Natural Systems Lab out of the University of Manitoba. And it's in collaboration with the Bauta Family Initiative on Canadian seed security. It's a program that's been running for about 9 years now. And some of you folks on the call here, some of you have been in the program for the beginning, some of you joined in the middle, and some of you are just starting. So quite a mix of growers from across the country with a diversity of farms, diversity of ideas. And so this is just one way that we can kind of do a bit of cross-pollination with all of you. On today's agenda, what we have is first we're going to hear a bit of an update from Martin Entz about the program, and then we'll hear from a couple of farmers who have been in the program for some time, hear a little bit about their farm and some of their thoughts about participatory breeding. And maybe just a quick little note, Jim, one of the growers you're about to hear from, yesterday Jim let me know that he'd be interested. Hey there, can all of you, can you hear me? Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. I just got kicked out of the meeting. So hopefully that doesn't happen again, or if it does happen again, you guys can keep going without me. One of you can take over, self-authorize and just take over for me. But oh yeah, so Jim had asked if we could possibly make some time on this call to talk about a few issues related to COVID and some of the ways that farmers are responding and coping with that. So what we'll do is we'll just kind of go ahead with, as planned, the presentations, and we'll save a little bit of time towards the end of the meeting to address that. And if anyone wants to stay on a little bit later on the call, we can keep discussing it. So right now the call is set to end, for me, it would be at 11:15, but we can keep the call going a little bit longer to talk about those kinds of ideas. So yeah, so I think without any further ado, and maybe before I get kicked off again, I'll pass it over to Martin for updates.
Hey, thank you very much, Iris. I guess maybe the first thing good morning, everyone. Maybe the first thing I'd like to do is just to see if there's any questions or concerns. Michelle Karkner is also on the call. So I do have a short presentation. There's a few things I'd like to share with you, but I'd like to hear if there's any problems or if you have questions. All right. In that case, I'll share my screen. And where are we here? Here we are. I'll start my presentation. Whoops, it's not what I wanted. Okay. Can you all see that screen? It says participatory wheat and oat breeding at the top.
Martin, we just see your, like every slide as a story, not the actual full screen.
Okay. Is that better? Can you see?
Now it's your presentation, but it's not the full screen presentation mode.
That's okay. I had it on full screen a minute ago and it didn't work very well. So I think this is fine, right? Iris, is this okay?
Yeah, we can see it. If you did want to try to put it into the full screen, you can also, if you click on at the very top on slideshow.
How's that?
Oh, there we go. Now we can see it, but we can see like the next slide as well. So it's kind of like in a presentation mode.
Okay, I'll do slideshow. I'll try that. From the beginning. There
yeah, I think that should work. And it might take a moment.
Okay, you've got the next slide, right? So
Right now, what we see is the first slide.
okay, the full screen. Okay, great. Okay, good. I think you're all familiar with the program. And it's been so much fun. Thank you so much for participating. I'm so humbled whenever people send their feedback and do their selections, and it's been amazing. And, you know, just so you know, Iris was the first person who got this thing started, and then Ann Kirk, and then Michelle Kartner, and other people have worked on this. So just a quick recap of how it works. Here's Ann in the growth chamber. You know, she made.
Sorry, your slides are not changing.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Okay, I'm done with that. I'm going with this. How's that?
There we go. Now we're on, it looks like we're on your third slide.
Okay. Okay, so can you see Ann there?
Yes, now we can. Yeah, I think there's just a bit of a delay, but we're good.
Okay, so the way it works is that we make the crosses go out to the farmers, and they select for 3 years, hopefully, and then we've been getting the material back and testing it. So what I'm going to talk about today is a little bit of that testing results, a little bit of those testing results, and also some new ideas that we have for the future. So you should see another slide right now. Iris is going to confirm whether you do. All right. And so, you know, we put the farmer selections into replicated field experiments. I should add that we also have worked with potatoes, and the evaluation of the potatoes is now being led by Helen Jensen in Quebec. So that is also happening. So we've been growing the material that the farmers have produced in replicated field experiments. We started off just testing them in Manitoba, but now we've had tests in Prince Edward Island, in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. And we are planning to put a testing site at Saint-Rome in Quebec this year. The next slide here shows some of the results of the what I call the second cohort of farmers. And so you should see a slide that shows you some Carmen 2017 data. And what we did in this program is we sent out populations to farmers that had come from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. And that's how we started the program. But the data that you're looking at here is from crosses that were made by Ann Kirk at the University of Manitoba. So the exciting thing is all the farmers who participated here, the intellectual property belongs to you. We don't lay any claim over it. And so what you're seeing here is, can you see my cursor moving?
Yeah, we can see it, Martin.
Okay, so over here, you know, we have the Czech varieties, the you know, Cadillac, this is Tradition, Red Fife, Glen, etc. And so you can see the commercially available varieties at Carmen in 2017, and then you can see over on the left-hand side the yields in bushels per acre of what the farmers have come up with. And you know, I think you will identify yourselves, some of you, by your initials in that list. So this is at Carmen, and so this is how we've run the experiments. I'll just go to another site. Well, there I'm just pointing out that 2 of the highest yielding wheats are from people who selected, who were, I know that this farm is only about 30 kilometers from Carmen, so maybe that's it's got kind of what we call a home field advantage. If we look at the oats, no, this is wheat as well. And what in 2017, this is an experiment that Michelle led. And what's interesting is the same high yielding wheat from Carmen ends up being also the highest yielding wheat at Somerset. So that's kind of interesting. It shows some stability. The Somerset site was, as you can see, a much lower yield, only between 15 and 25 bushels per acre. It had salt stress and severe drought. So it's a very good test for the material. Going through the slide, continuing, Michelle looked at these again in 2019 at Carmen, and I'm just going to jump ahead to Swift Current. And these yields are actually, the relative difference between these varieties doesn't change, but the yields are actually not that high. They're more like down here. But this is 4,000 kilograms per hectare is 60 bushels per acre. And these are not 100 bushels per acre. So I'm sorry about that. I haven't changed that yet. So you can see here we've got two Saskatchewan varieties, Ian Cushion's and Stuart Wells. And you can see it's quite interesting. The ones that were selected in Saskatchewan are performing better in Swift Current than the Czechs. And, so that's the kind of work that we've been doing is after the farmers have done their selections, we've been yield testing the varieties to see, how they're doing. And you'll all get a copy of this if you'd like a PDF of this PowerPoint, I will send it to Iris and she can send it to you. So, on average, what we've found with the farmer selections from the crosses that Ann Kirk made, and by the way, these crosses were quite interesting. Some of them were with named varieties and heritage varieties, and they're very interesting crosses. And those of you who participate will know what the parents of your crosses are. And you can see that we've tested them at 4 locations, 2 in 2017, 2 in 2019, and at 3 of the 4 locations, we've got a higher yield of the farmer selections versus the Czechs. At one of the locations, there was, in fact, the Czechs are a little higher than the farmer selections. And so this is the kind of stuff you'd expect. I'm just going to go up 1 slide. Actually, I'm going to go up 2 slides and point out that one of the really strong Czech varieties is Vesper. And Vesper is a midge-tolerant variety from Ag Canada, and it has performed extremely well in all of the experiments. You should be looking at the Somerset 2017. You can see Vesper, very high yielding. We go back to Carmen 2017, there's Vesper. So that, I think a lot of wheat breeders are asking themselves whether we may have more insect pressure with midge on our wheat than we think we do. It's quite interesting that Vesper, which is midge tolerant, has performed so well. It's interesting if you look at AAC Brandon, which is the most popular wheat in Manitoba for conventional producers, did very poorly. It was a worst yielder at Carmen in 2017. Did okay at Somerset, and it unfortunately wasn't included in the last year's experiments. So, those are a little bit of the results from the farmers. I don't want to take too much time. I'm not going to go through that graph. Just looking at the oats, we also have the participatory oat. This is Carmen 2017. Iris, are you keeping up with the slides here? Can you see what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's corresponding to what you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm finally making sense. That's awesome. There's the Czech varieties in 2017. So you can see some of these farmer selections did very well. Others did not do that well. So that's not unexpected. There's always variation. Here's the oats at the high stress site. and showing the results. And if you see yourself on this axis here, you can, I'm going to email you the PDF so you can study that in greater detail. So that, you know, again, the oats were yielding a little bit higher in the farmer selections than the checks. You know, I think that's been an interesting story in this project, is that, you know, farmers have selected things that are at least as productive, or in some cases a bit more, in some cases a bit less, than what professional plant breeders have come up with in developing varieties. I think that's exciting. I think that means there's a basis to carry on. And so let's talk. I'm going to jump around in the slides a little bit. I'm going to go to this slide here, and you can see a bunch of jelly beans at the bottom. Can you see them, Iris?
Yes, yeah, in a little bag, it looks like.
Yeah, this is making me hungry for lunch, because that's what I eat for lunch every day, is organic jelly beans. But I'll go back to the slides that I skipped. But this is something that we've decided to pursue. And you know, I mean, one of the questions that comes up is what we do. What we do with the farmer selections. And so I'm going to jump ahead to this slide. And so just to show you kind of the chronology of what we've been thinking in our project, you know, we started the organic breeding program in 2004 with Ag Canada. In 2011, we made crosses at the University of Manitoba for I call them boutique crosses. So we've got crosses that are specific to Eastern Canada, Western Canada. We're in Manitoba, so we're in Central Canada. This is the longitudinal center of Canada. And then, you know, we've done the on-farm testing and we've evaluated it. And really, a lot of farmers have questions about what's the future? What do we do with our varieties? And this is where there's a fork in the road, really. Farmers are able to continue to grow their varieties. And this is a picture of a flour mill from British Columbia. And they may have a milling business or a seed business that they're selling directly to consumers. So that's perfectly legal for farmers to grow their own seed and to sell it from their farms, but it can never be sold as a seed variety, and it should never enter the export market system, of course. And these pictures here are just from Michelle's awesome organic plots in 2019, where she increased the seed for farmers. So for example, this is Ian Cushion's variety that was increased last year. And so that seed, we're in the process, we've sent half of it to Ian. Here's seed from Neubergthal, about 30 kilometers from Carmen. This is Terry Muro's selection. And that is, so we've bulked up seeds that we can send to farmers, and then farmers can grow it on 1 or 2 acres and start their business. So that's one future. The other future is to for those varieties to the breeding programs, and Ag Canada scientists or other scientists could use the farmer selections for future crosses of some kind. So that's really my story. I have 2 other little additions I would like to just offer very quickly. We're going to be actually moving ahead and making composite crosses or making composites from the farm selections. So let me just try to explain. It's not the top part, it's this part here. What we will do is we will, let's say this is farmer, let's say this is, you know, Alison Squires. So, you know, she grew F3, F4, F5 populations, or the, you know, the 3rd, 4th, 5th generation after the cross. we have held back a little bit of seed every time, most times that we sent the seed back. So we can take from this cross, and maybe this is Jim Grieshaber, maybe this is somebody else, this Stuart Wells, and this might be Ian Cushion. So we can actually take exactly the same amount of seeds from each of these and put them together in what's called a composite, and actually send that back out to farmers who want to grow these or experiment with these or continue to select in these. This is what's happening in Europe right now, is this is one of the things that's happening in Europe, is that the organic breeders are creating these composites and putting them out on farms, and the farmers grow them year after year. And this has a significant amount of genetic diversity in it, and it should be a fairly, it's a climate smart population. It can adapt with change because it has that diversity. So this is a brand new direction for our program. I haven't talked to anybody about it except Michelle and I have been discussing it. So just as an example, in Germany and in Italy, they've created these, and then they go to farmers. They give like 10 kilograms to farmers, and the farmers can grow them. And in Europe, they're now actually allowed to sell these into the market. The regulation system has made a derogation where people can sell these populations. Now that's not going to happen in Canada tomorrow, that's for sure. But anyways, I wanted to share that with you. And one final slide actually comes from, or two final slides. We've been interested how the farmer selections respond to organic nutrient sources. And Jess Nixie is a new graduate student, and she's looking at the response of a farmer selection and a traditional variety to different organic phosphorus amendments, such as composted manure, insect frass, digestate, and then comparing it to monoammonium phosphate. And I'm gonna end with this slide because it's pretty exciting to us. Here, what she did is looked at the growth of the varieties at stem elongation at the site where I showed the picture, and the light blue bars, this is AAC Brandon, and the dark blue bars is farmer selection from Ian Grossart. And what's quite interesting is if you look at the monoammonium phosphate on the right, the map, you can see that the AAC Brandon produced significantly more biomass than the farmer selection. But if we look at the, and that may not, that's what we would have predicted because that's a, that's how AAC Brandon was bred, to be responsive to monoammonium phosphate fertilizer. But if we look at, let's say, composted manure, the results are exactly the opposite. The farmer selection has a statistically significantly higher biomass than the AAC Brandon. And so that has allowed us to come up with this preliminary conclusion that farmer selected lines under organic production result in better response to organic nutrients. And we're continuing this work as well with other graduate students. So that's my report. Iris?
Great, thanks. Thanks for your report, Martin. Very interesting. Thank you for sharing all of that with us. It's always so interesting to see how the farmer lines are doing, like to see the data, and it's exciting to see how it responds to nutrients. And very excited about your jelly beans, your composite populations. I think that'll be really cool to see how that goes.
Can we call that the Jelly Bean Project from now on? And it'll be in the spirit of Ronald Reagan, who used to have a jar of jelly beans, my hero, on his desk. So thank you. Yeah, the Jelly Bean Project.
How about let's do just one question now, so that we can so that we have time for the presentations. But let's do one question now, Then we'll do the presentations, and then we'll have time for questions at the end for farmers and for Martin. So is there one kind of burning question right now that someone wants to ask about that presentation? Okay, so if there aren't any questions at the moment, no one wants to throw one out there, then how about, thank you, Martin, thanks for that, and we'll probably have more questions for you at the end. And now I will pass it over to Jim, if you are ready to go. Jim.
Just checking to see if you can hear me.
Yes.
And there's share screen.
Yeah, so while Jim, oh, there we go. Okay, so your screen is shared. So Jim is a farmer who has been part of the program for a while now. And you know what, I'll just pass it over to Jim because he's going to describe his operation, what he's been doing. So Jim, if you're ready to go, you can go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm Jim from Agassiz, BC, which is, well, we'll get to that. I just want to say at the outset that my presentation is designed to try and provide some scope for people in the mid-range, I think, smaller mid-range, and recognizing that many of you have vastly more knowledge and expertise than we do in grain growing. But I'm hoping something in here will provide some useful indicators for you. Page down. So that's our location taken from the local mountain. Our farm is located right in the middle of it's an island off the Fraser Valley. We're halfway between Chilliwack and Cope, Harrison Hot Springs. Some of you visit the resort is nearby, and the area is noted for its rainy winters and Pacific climate, of course. So we used to be a beef farm. We switched from beef and forage, I should say, and we switched from beef into grain largely for financial reasons. We currently farm with 2 dairy farms, and they provide us the manure which makes everything go. We entered into grains largely for financial reasons. Needless to say, beef is not terribly such a good financial idea for the Fraser Valley. Many of you will know that, but that's what we were starting in years ago. And to be honest, we were a bit curious, and the intellectual stimulation of after learning a little bit about grain from doing some research on the Canadian Grain Commission and Canadian Wheat Board years back when it was both under severe attack, led us to say, well, what really should we be doing here in the Fraser Valley, given all this expertise in Canada? And besides, we had an old combine, and what else can you do with an old combine except for grow grain in it, right? So at the same time, the 100-mile diet was quite popular in the Vancouver area. So we were reaching out to that local market, and the demand for organic products, of course, was increasing and still is. So it was an easy transition for us to envision, even though very difficult in practice, of course. So the challenges of growing grains in Fraser Valley, of course, as I've alluded to, is it's wet. The spring planting gives us a harvest just before the fall rains set in, and fall planting gives us a much earlier harvest, and we're actually doing that as our winter wheat as our staple crop, and trying to use the spring crops to bolster that. So we've grown all the things. We haven't grown ancient grains, but some of the others listed on the left there, we've grown in very small quantities, of course. Everything is in a small scale. But for us, the appropriate scale was important for us. And it's really hard to get grain equipment isolated from everyone else in the Fraser Valley. There's some combines that exist, but in terms of cleaning facility and anything like that, we're really an isolated outpost. And so we were dependent upon knowledge of people across the prairies and sometimes across the border to move things ahead. Many of you, and the reason I feel comfortable talking to many of you is that you'll have the ability to use the participatory plant breeding crosses in novel ways, already having much of the infrastructure. So our question, was there really a market? And in fact, we've tied into bakers, we've tied into direct marketing, a little bit of dabbling in brewers and distillers, and also in wholesale. But so it's the security of markets that is most difficult, and of course that's why we've set up originally set up the Canadian Wheat Board and the pools and so on in Canada originally, and we never had that here, and we're really seeing the impacts of trying to do all the marketing ourselves. But from our standpoint, we didn't anticipate the byproduct, which is very valuable organic straw for market gardens and just vegetable growers throughout the Fraser Valley and even across to Bowen Island. People and up the Sunshine Coast, people come to buy the straw, so we're quite lucky with that. For us, the agronomic issues were rust, particularly when we were growing winter wheat, which I say was what we hope to be our mainstay. We got Buteo, the most rust-resistant variety that we could find from the prairies, but it didn't do us, so we were looking for others. Lodging, of course, and when I'm talking lodging, I'm talking severe lodging. Here's a heritage Marquis crop from last year before, and of course, you all know, given our old equipment, pretty tough slugging. Here's our Massey 410, gobbling up some rye under very difficult circumstances. And the other thing that we've come across recently, which I think is going to become an increasing problem, is brassica weeds coming in from grain that's brought in from the prairies, we believe, and supplied to dairy farmers and chicken farmers as feed, or cheap source of feed, and indeed in part of the concentrate for dairy herds in their parlors. And of course, when we spread the manure, we're doing a great job of spreading that seed around. So it's a huge challenge for us, and one that was not anticipated at all. So we have, just to highlight, we have very basic equipment. Looks very old-fashioned to most people. This seeder was bought for $50 from the auction. Our two combines, a Massey Harris, which we're keeping going through hell or high water, from 1958, and a 410, as I say. And again, we had a tough time getting equipment. I wouldn't recommend doing what we did, which was accepting equipment kindly gifted us. Took a number of years to get going. This take a little time catching up here. This 510 sitting here with a smattering of white on it. That's not snow. That's makeup from a movie set in Vancouver. We get our combines wherever we can. That one ended up being a junker because they'd thrown away all the inside parts of it, and then we get parts from the prairies. So we have a huge weed problem, of course, as everyone does, but probably more even here. And that's one of the reasons we're looking to other varieties that can perform even with weed competition, severe weed competition. And so the Manitoba program was particularly attractive to us. We've retired that one cleaner for something. There's a Kip Kelly dockage tester as well, brought in from Manitoba just to process our seeds and sometimes our hulless oats. Renovating seed equipment, and this is how it looks at the present day, with just quite a simple clipper fanning mill from I think it's the 1920s. To be honest, we've seen better equipment in the local museum, but there you go. It does the job, and we've also managed to screen out or sieve out and blow out our vibrate out our brassica weeds with a gravity table, and without the gravity table, we'd be absolutely toast. And the gravity table has also been a community resource. This is beet growers from Chilliwack who've come in to to clean their beet seed, which is really prickly and hard to deal with otherwise, but the gravity table did a great job for them. And we've also cleaned some rice seed and some other wheat seed for people on a custom basis. We had manufactured for us, or upgraded for us, a roller, and I mention this because I think it's particularly interest today in that we're able to roll our hulless oats here on the farm and provide a product that is extremely popular. This is, the idea was given to us from George in Ottawa many years ago, and we've been growing AC Gale, which is low in trichome, so it's not quite so nasty to deal with as some of the other varieties. But with the rolling on the farm, we can now sell that product at farmers market and to various outlets in Vancouver, as I'll show you. So again, we operate on a tote bag scale, which I know to most people is micro, but with the prices that we're getting, it makes sense for us. And these are bags transported to a local mill for our CSA program. It's taking time to come across. And sorry, the video is not going through a bit, so there we are. And then also wanted to say that in terms of marketing, if we turn to marketing now, we have an active CSA program, probably about 100 people. It'll expand a little bit this year, we expect. They come out for a farm visit and get to see their crop growing. Highly popular event on the farm, and really builds a sense of community. And we love it because the people who come are really committed to sourcing food from a place that they trust. So when they come and see even rustic barns and some pretty basic equipment, they're delighted with what they get if the quality is good, and that's what we try and insist on. Here's our farmers market stall, just coming through. Yoshi Sugiyama on the right there, standing underneath the organic sign, is selling this sort of scale bags that he's selling there on the farm. Much of that is rolled oats, or if we don't roll it quite so hard, we just crimp it. We call it cold rolled, you can see on the label there, because no steaming is required and no other processing. It's straight from the field through the roller into the bag, and certainly has its unique flavor. Steel crimped, we call it, because it has similar texture to steel cut. So the people who like steel cut oats like the crimped oats, a little tougher. Takes longer to cook. Significantly, oats also cooks quite a bit like rice, and that opens up some potential too, particularly in the, well, maybe not so much in the Asian market because rice is rice, but in people who are looking for substitutes for rice as we go. Here's another outlet we have in Vancouver, which is some lovely people selling no packaging. So people come in with their containers and refill them. They have adapted their practices, of course, under the COVID regime, but they're continuing on. And there are a number of stores like this in Vancouver, and I think it's a growing model, becoming increasingly popular. My wife also operates Market Garden, and I mention it because it has a potential for people to use in the current regimen for, sorry, it's taking a bit longer coming on, but I'll try and click sooner next time. She has families come to the farm. Basically, we've expanded our home garden, and we have people come. I think she's like 7 or 8 families come regularly to the farm to harvest under her supervision. And instead of a box program, we'd have to do the harvesting in advance. People come and harvest the vegetables maybe on a Saturday or an evening during the week after work, and then they take those vegetables home and they clean them more rigorously at home. So it's a lovely model. It provides additional home income, and it could be expanded more largely, given that you need to select people quite carefully, and it tends to weed weed itself out. Those people who are most interested are also the ones who are best at doing their own harvesting. And finally, we have traditionally marketed at a Christmas fair. You see the bags on the right there. I'm stepping back just for a view. And we do school and university visits on the farm. Not a lot because it chews up an enormous amount of time and energy, but it is an opportunity to provide some valuable education into the community. So just in terms of crops that we have grown, our focus is on hard red spring. CDC Go has been our mainstay for a year. We've tried Superb and Stettler, and then we've gone into the heritage variety since then. As I mentioned, we tried CDC Buteo and Falcon, but had rust problems with Boast. Skagit 1109 is we imported formerly from Washington State University, and has been very good against both lodging and rust, and is a regular part of our rotation now. AC Andrew from, what is it, 2004, I believe it is, bred for the ethanol industry originally, is very popular for pancakes and pie crust. Lovely flavor, totally unanticipated. I just thought it was going to be just a straight starchy wheat, but people love it and come back for it. And then rye, we've tried common rye, of course, had terrible problems with lodging. AC Remington, we got some breeder seed, which didn't work out for us. We're now into Prima, but we're still looking for a low, high quality baking rye. Triticale, we've grown, just dabbled in a little. Common oats, AC Mustang works well. And I say Hollis Oats, AC Gale, but we're having a hard time getting seed for that, so we've gone to Casino. And then from heritage wheat from Plant Resource Canada, we've got Marquis, Thatcher, Saunders, and Manitou. Marquis is particularly of interest to us because it was crossed and partially bred here in Agassiz at the research station. So it has a bit of a story to it. And that was 100 years ago, just the last few years. And then, of course, the University of Manitoba, we're really anticipating growing the wheat on a field basis. I hope starting this year, and thanks to the staff at Manitoba for multiplying up our seed. I can't tell you how much we'd appreciate that. So just to highlight Marquis before I go on, there's a little link there to a program that CBC Radio Canada did on the farm. Most of that Marquis has gone to an organic bakery at the Vancouver Farmers Market in Vancouver, where they've grown a specialized, just a Marquis loaf, they call it. And they've been taking all the Marquis that we can ever produce. In fact, they wanted us to plow up the entire 94-acre field and say, just grow Marquis for us, thank you very much. But of course, we can't do that. I won't go too much into the test plots. We planted, thanks to Martinense, the 43 wheat varieties, just to have a look-see. And I have to say that these sorts of activities have gone a little bit beyond me in their magnitude, but we learned some things that we can grow lots of spring wheats here, and we're grateful for that. And of course, our subject is the wheat cross here. Next slide, taking its time, we'll get there. We've been growing in a small plot. Our selection criteria has probably been far more rudimentary than what some of you who have far more experience selecting has been. And part of that is for our interest in retaining variability within the selection itself. So I'm not surprised if, and I believe this is the case, our selections don't do terribly well at Carmen or anywhere else. I wouldn't really expect it, and I'm not worried about that in the least. As long as it does well here, that's what we're concerned most about. Sorry, I got to do this clicking a bit quicker here. I'm just giving it a pause to tie in here. We have deliberately, this is Michelle, during the one and only farm visit. We missed Martin's visit for we were away, but just to illustrate the competition that there's the Hollis Oats just beside Michelle there, And then on the right is a very weedy patch. The right of the flags is a CDC Go field, which is pretty well overrun with couch grass and other annual weeds. And then the center area is the Manitoba cross, holding its own in its plot there. So we have high hopes for it. Interestingly enough, we had and the next slide will show we had a plot grown next to some field beans, which we left from one year to the next, and alas, it overwintered and gave us a lovely volunteer crop the following year. So we're actually treating the spring Manitoba cross as a winter crop, and it seemed to work. So I'm really looking forward to the continued collaboration between us as a group, and I'm really grateful for all the assistance. I'm sorry, I have to include Ann Kirk on the slides. I did this slide up first thing this morning, and I apologize to leave you out, Ann. I really appreciate your assistance, but all the folk there at Manitoba, and also the staff. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention. Look forward to questions after the next presentations.
Great, thanks so much, Jim. That was great. It was really great to see all the pictures from your farm, get to know your farm, and see what you're doing on there with the different crops and different equipment. I'm guessing there's probably a bunch of questions or comments from folks on the call, but how about let's do those after we hear from Allison Squires, who is another farmer who's been in the program for some time, and she farms in Saskatchewan. So I will pass it over to you, Allison, if you're ready to go.
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, it's just a little bit faint.
Oh, okay, I'll scooch you up to the, okay. And you can see my slides, I hope?
Not yet. Have you shared your screen?
Oh.
And there we go.
Yes, aha! I thought Martin and I were gonna be twins there for a minute. Sorry, I used to know how to do this kind of thing. Oh, there we go, perfect.
There we go, yeah.
So this is actually really cool. I really enjoyed Jim's presentation. It's a completely different scenario from what we work with here in southern Saskatchewan. So I farm with my husband. We have 3 little boys, and we farm just in the very southern tip of Saskatchewan there, right in the middle of the province. We actually have we do business across the border as well a lot, so we're really, really close to that. Soil type they operate on is loam, sandy loam, and we're pretty dry. On an average year, we get around 12 to 14 inches for the whole year, so a bit of a different scenario from the previous presentation, which is good. This is the kind of terrain that we work with here on our farm. When people think of Saskatchewan, they think large, flat. That's not what we have down here. Our farm is named for the Woodmount Upland region, which is where we live. So this is the kind of hilly terrain that we deal with. So we have a few challenges with that as well. But a lot of what we do on the farm is focused on the 5 principles of soil health. We learned a lot about this in 2016. It's kind of when we came into our own with that, and we've been working on implementing as many of things as we can to support these 5 health principles as we can. I won't get into a whole lot of detail. A lot of you have seen Cody's presentations already, but I do want to bring this up. We do a lot of soil health and biological testing on our farm. We do microscope work and all sorts of other testing as well. And I only bring this up is because we're seeing, and this relates to the participatory plant breeding, we're seeing a lot of benefits when we're promoting the biological health of the soil. So for example, when we're tilling our soil, we're seeing a certain level of biological health and diversity. When we're reducing our tillage, we're increasing that. And when we're incorporating things like cover crops, and then now we're doing grazing as well on our farm, we're seeing that, that metric increase. And comparing it to the conventional no-till or mill-till systems, we're right around that with organic till systems. So organic soil, tilled or not, is pretty healthy soil, but we know that we can do a lot better. And that is one of the reasons why we were so interested in the participatory plant breeding project. We first heard about it in 2012. There's a picture of Cody and me there. We attended the OACC conference in Winnipeg. Iris is nodding because she remembered meeting us there. I was fresh out of grad school. We had just started the farm 2 years prior. So of course I made Cody do a poster in the poster presentation section, and we stood there with our little poster because we were so interested in being as involved in as much on-farm research as we possibly could. We knew this was an important aspect moving forward. So the reason why we wanted to join the PPB project is we knew that developing varieties for organic production on farm was one of the best ways we can promote organic farming and promote high yielding, healthy crops in organic agriculture. We know that developing varieties, particularly for organic production, address the differences in soil conditions that we experience across Canada, also in the differences in nutrient availability and soil microbial communities that are found in organic soil versus conventionally farmed soil. And I think Martin did a great job in his last wrap-up slide, kind of addressing where I think the future is in organic plant breeding is with his phosphorus slide. We also know that developing varieties for organic production, we have variable weather conditions across the province. We're extremely dry here. Jim's got a lot more moisture there. So doing this across Canada is being really helpful for that. And also better suited to increased weed pressure. We know organic farming, we have a lot more, especially annual, and now for reducing tillage, perennial weed pressure. So getting varieties that are much more competitive for that is important to us on our farm. So Iris asked us to talk a little bit about how we implemented the program. So this is an example of a plot map that I would throw together every year. I think this is the one from 2013. We would pick a field close to our yard sites for convenience sake. We tried to use a field that we were already seeding to a cereal, so we kind of have our own built-in check strip situation there, but that wasn't always possible because we have a pretty diverse rotation across our farm. We tried to also pick a level spot with no major weed patches that would compromise the plots, and we wanted to pick a space that was big enough for all the plots together. So we typically get 3 oat varieties, 3 wheat crosses, and then so our plots were 1 meter wide by 20 meters long. To seed the plots, we just use a garden seeder, the really high-tech stuff. We have a large air drill on our farm, but we didn't obviously use that for this. In the garden seeder, you can get it at, we got ours from, it's inherited from Cody's grandpa, but I've seen them in Early's, I've seen them in PV Mart and Lee Valley as well. So they're pretty ubiquitous. For the oats, we used the beet okra disc plate. We found that to be the best one where the seeds weren't jumping out of the seeder. And in the wheat plots, we used the bean small peas plate. So there's a couple different options. That's just the ones that we chose to use. In the beginning, we used the spacer on the side of the garden plot seeder to mark the lines. We have 7-inch spacing on our air drill, but one day we woke up and we're like, this is silly. Why don't we just run the air drill down the plots without dispensing seed, and it'll pre-mark the lines for us. So that's what we've been doing. So now we're a lot more accurate with our seed spacings, which is great. We also decided we needed to place the plots. The first couple of years we did the plots right next to each other, kind of like what you see at the research farms, and we're not very good at upkeep. So we decided we placed the plots far enough apart that we could either work or now mow between the plots. Now that we're reducing our tillage, we just bring our garden mower out between the plots to kind of keep the weed populations down. And the plots look a lot prettier. For selection criteria, we didn't focus so much on yield, actually. We focused on a few other different things. We harvested everything by hand with just little garden clippers. And I tried to harvest evenly along the plot. So I go up one side and down the other side of the plot, and I do that 3 times, just to make sure I wasn't only harvesting from one section in one part of the plot. Things that I look for personally, we swath all of our crop here. So I wanted taller plants. Taller plants also means that we have more residue to feed the soil over the winter too, and to catch snow. So taller is better in our farm. Drooping or lodging would be bad, so we didn't want to select for anything that was doing that. We would select for head size. We wanted, obviously, increased head size would be great. And we wanted to select for the absence of disease. So anything that was color different or anything that looked shriveled or gross, we would. And we also selected, if I saw that there were some plants that were better at keeping the weeds at bay than others, I would select for those as well. I didn't do any, I didn't pull out any plants during the growing season. I just selected everything at the end. Some of the challenges, other prairie farmers on this call will know this challenge quite well, and we're definitely seeing a decrease in the amount of moisture we're getting in 2016. 2017, we actually didn't have a harvest here in our farm. We only got about a 1/4 inch of rain for the whole growing season, and it's gotten a bit better. I don't have the data for 2019 here, but we're seeing more rain last year, but just mostly in the fall. So that's been a bit of a challenge, and that's one of the reasons why we didn't take on any populations last year, because I wasn't able to send any seed back in 2017 or 2018, so I didn't want to waste the resource anymore on that. So where we would like the program to go next, I think it's a great program. I'm hoping we can rejoin it either this year, well, not this year, maybe next year. I like Martin's idea of the jelly bean soup. I think that's going to be a great thing to try. I'm very excited about that. So I think it's great to continue the program to involve more and more farmers. The more variety, the better, I think, for people. Everyone selects for different things, so I think that's great. I'd love to look at other crop types. We actually don't grow a whole lot of cereal crops here. On our farm, we like to do the pulses and the oilseeds. So we have some interest in looking at some pulses. That would be great. We've been trying to grow chickpeas for quite a while here and haven't had that much success. Lentils is a big crop for us as well, so anything like that would be awesome. We would love to have a commercially available variety established. We are doing some marketing, like what Jim said in his call about tote bagging. We are selling some of our stuff to small scale to mills across Canada, but the bulk of our marketing is obviously by the semi-load, and it's hard to market some of this stuff without it being able to do so on that larger scale. I love the fact that milling is already happening on some of these varieties, and it'd be awesome to get some data on how well these different varieties are performing for milling reasons or for consumption, if we had a comparison on how much better the bread is, or even nutritional content. I think that would be really cool. There's a lot of interest right now in nutrient density of organic versus conventional or anything like that. I think this would really fit in well with that kind of stuff. And I love these calls, actually. I really look forward to them, and I love to hear what everyone else is doing. So continue having this great group of people meet on a regular basis would be great. That's what I have to share. Oh, and then my slide of a cow. We always had to put in cows at the end of every presentation now, according to Cody. So there you go.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Allison. Yeah, it's always interesting to see how the plots are laid out, and also just what's going on in your farm too otherwise. So thank you so much for sharing that. So how about, I'm going to just open it up now for questions. If anyone has any questions for Jim or Allison or Martin, you can go ahead.
Hello, it's Charles Lenachek. Iris, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, I have a question for Martin. I was just wondering about the varieties of wheat. If you blend several varieties of wheat and put them in the field, are they going to be eventually, are they going to cross-pollinate somehow and eventually change into a uniform type of wheat?
Okay, yeah, I heard the question of variety mixtures and then growing that for a number of years. That question comes up a lot, and it has been well researched in in many different parts of the world. And the short answer, unfortunately, is no. Doesn't really provide the, doesn't really allow you to generate that, that new entity. And that's why these, either making a cross like Allison is working with and Jim was working with, and then creating new genetic diversity and selecting from that, or these multi-lines are really what you're probably looking at. Is don't start off with just 10 different varieties and grow them. And I mean, that will give you some diversity, and there is literature, scientific studies, there have been scientific studies done on that. But starting with the a much greater genetic diversity is really the way to go. And I think by next year we should be able to provide you with some of those multi-lines, depending on, I forget what area you're in, but yeah, the short answer is, I mean, variety blends do provide a little bit of stability, but they won't create this adapted biotype that I think is what you were looking for.
Okay, thank you. And can I ask another question? So with the breeding program, if you do have multiple varieties, are you saying that you may do the crosses of several different? Can you do crosses of several different ones at one time, or can you only do crosses of 2 at a time?
Well, you know what happens is you just cross 2 parents, and then you can back cross them. You can take that offspring and cross it to a completely different individual, and so you can create 3, 4-way, 5-way crosses. Each of those takes a generation, so it takes a lot of time.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what plant breeding is like. Where are you located, Charles? Sorry.
Yeah, Lemberg. We're at Lemberg, Saskatchewan.
Yeah, so at the Ag Canada Swift Current or Brandon or Crop Development Center in Saskatoon, I mean that's what they do. They're always crossing, and I guess one of my I admire that approach. That is incredibly amazing. But what we're doing in this program is we're actually not getting rid of the variation as quickly. We're embracing the variation in the population that's generated, and also selecting it under organics. So, yeah.
Well, that was my next question. I noticed last year I selected, I grew one variety. I can't remember which it was, but the seed plot indicated like some with beards and some without beards. So is that noted by you as a proper cross, or is that?
That probably indicates that, I mean, I don't think we would have, yeah. So it's a segregating population. Was it the first year or the second year that you had it?
Well, the first year that I grew it.
Okay, so the first year that you're growing it, you get the maximum amount of diversity expressed. And so maybe Allison wants to comment on this in terms of what she has experienced with that type of thing, or Jim, because it's not unusual for you to get both bearded and unbearded because you got maximum diversity in that first year. Allison's nodding, so she experienced the same thing. Now, what you should select, I think, is the plants that you think grow the best. And if your population in the end ends up having some beards and some without beards, that's just fine.
Good. Well, thank you, Martin. And another question or another comment I had was my first year in the program was I chose AC Scotia Acadia, which was PWB 16, and I was quite impressed with it, thinking that only in Western Canada we had good breed varieties. But is that a breed that was done or created in Eastern Canada?
If Michelle is still on the call, I think she is. I'm going to get her to comment. I do know that Acadia is grown in Eastern Canada, but apparently it was bred in Brandon in like the 1930s. But Michelle, do you have a comment?
Yeah, that's a completely Eastern cross. And so, yeah, Scotia and Acadia are very common. Actually, Scotia is often a check for a lot of varietal experiments there. So
they're an older variety that would be you're reinventing them because you don't see them in the seed guides and the common seed suppliers catalogs.
You might see Scotia in Quebec and the Maritimes, but Acadia is one of those older varieties. But I have had the same experience with Scotia. The seeds are the heads look different from our varieties. But yeah, I've always been pretty impressed with Scotia personally from my trials where I've grown it out. It's a completely
Well,
Eastern, yeah.
I'll just ask one more question, and everybody else can ask some questions after. I'm just looking at first year, and I'll be looking at planting again this year. I presume I'm planting the same 4 varieties I chose last year, and continue with that. But also, I guess what's the how many years am I going to do it? What's the long-term goal? Once I've done that, are we going to be looking at different varieties, or are we going to end the program or continue the program for development of more different varieties? Are you going to select more crosses as time goes on?
Well, I'll jump in and answer that. I think the genetically, mathematically, selecting in the same, you're calling them varieties, or in the same, bag of seed that you're getting, the same cross, for 3 years is really what is going to tailor that population to your growing conditions. So you've done 1 year, do it for 2 more. That's important. And at that point, you, as I mentioned, you sort of have that fork in the road. You have selected for something that's, going to be tailored to the conditions that it experienced under your growing in your place. And then you can do a few things. You can just send it back to us, and it can go into the gene bank. It's Charles's selection, and future plant breeders may want to work with it. Number 2, you could increase the volume of that seed. And that's what we've been doing for farmers, is, increasing it from 1 kilogram up to 100 kilograms, so that they can put it into a small drill and seed, a couple of acres. And then you can do what Jim is doing, is look for, local markets. And the third thing you can do is actually this new idea that we have, is that we would combine the diversity that you experienced in Lemberg on your farm with the diversity on other farms, and create these multi-lines, and give you one of these multi-lines to grow on a fairly large acreage. But again, it would have to be for non-registered use, at least for now. So those are the 3 options you have. And then we'll send you a thank you card, and maybe a hat, and and a Christmas card. Yeah.
So eventually,
or a birthday card. You'll have to tell us when your birthday is.
Yes, of course. So eventually, Martin would.
Sorry, Charles, I'm just going to stop you there for just a second, and just
sure.
see if other folks have questions, and if not, we'll come back to you. But
sounds good.
Yeah, thanks. Any other questions from anyone on the call?
Hi, it's Ian. I just wanted to say 2 great presentations from Jim and Allison. It was also very interesting to see the 2 different approaches. Question for Martin about, is there any opportunities to try and integrate some midge resistance into any of these future farmer selections, or how big a challenge is that? Because on our farm, we typically grow midge resistant varieties as a matter of course, just to get that extra level of protection.
Okay, I think I heard your question, and maybe Michelle wants to jump in here, but some of our crosses are with midge resistant varieties. So the answer is yes, we have some crosses that for which we've used, I think Unity, right? It's midge resistant, right?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we have Unity as a parent in multiple lines.
Oh, yeah, thanks for the reminder, because I know I chose, I think one of my crosses in the most recent generations is with Unity, and it'll be interesting to see how it performs I guess, down the road here. But no, that's a great idea.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, you have a Unity Red 5 cross and a Brandon Unity cross.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. I don't
And
have
that Brandon Unity cross is the one I'd really pay attention to, because, you know, if Brandon is a little short for your liking, Ian, even if Unity is not the tallest variety, you're going to have diversity in those populations, and you may want to select something that looks good but is a little taller, and you know, then yeah. And the fact that you're never going to get complete homozygosity on that, you know, uniformity on that third, you know, that after 3 years is actually a real plus when it comes to maintaining the midge-resistant trait in that population.
I should also add that, Ian, you've finished 3 years of selection on those populations, and so we're going to keep the seed back and include it in our replicated trials, and hopefully increase the seed enough so that maybe we can increase seed like we did before for you.
Okay, well, no, that's great. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
So if farmers have completed 3 years of selection, I know Ward has sent an email to me, and they would like to have, you know, to grow an acre of it, we will do what we can to increase the seed for you, because, you know, we have that equipment. You know, there's a limit to what we can do every year, but I mean, we did it for Jim. And Jim, have you got your seed yet? Did it arrive, or is it still in transit?
It did arrive, and we're thrilled.
Okay, good. Got there.
Thank you very much.
So you know what, we are a little bit over time already, but if everyone's okay with staying on for a little bit more, I did see, how about before we hand it back to Jim to have the conversation, the COVID conversation, I think I saw that Jed, you had unmuted yourself. Did you have a question that you wanted to throw in before we do that?
I just wanted to say thank you for everybody. I felt bad last year because we never got a harvest off of our test plots. I think it was our third year, was the one we were all looking forward to sending in, but it just all died. So I hear that's happened to a couple of other farmers on the call here now, so I don't feel quite this bad. But thank you very much. And I had one question for Martin. If we plant a bag of seed that's several different varieties, what happens when you have multiple maturing dates? I've been selecting for early maturing as much as I have for yield. What's your guys' opinion on that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't really have much to say beyond what you would already be thinking. If you're putting multiple varieties together, make sure that they all have early maturity. You know, the seed guide would tell you that, but
I was meaning more with your jelly beans.
Oh, the jelly beans. Oh, yeah. Okay. That's a good one. That's a good one. I think you have to there might be a separate jelly bean bag for, you know, northern regions, a separate jelly bean bag for, let's say, Ontario, Quebec, and a separate jelly bean bag for the southern prairies, for example, so that you actually start from a position of being, you know, a little bit strategic in terms of the maturity dates. But I think if you, you know, if you have late maturing individuals in there and you swath that crop and those plants don't mature, maybe what you do then is those plants are going to have very small seeds. Then you can scalp those samples a bit harder, and you'll get that out of the population. But that's an excellent question, and I think we'll you know, gain some experience with these multi-lines here in the next couple of years. And so for a farmer like you who, you know, you put so much effort into it, and I'm really sorry that it didn't work out for you harvesting. That's life on the farm. I get that totally. You know, you should stay connected, and we can give you a bag of jelly beans.
Sounds good.
All right, good.
Okay, so there is one more quick question for Ward, and then we will pass it back to Jim. We have one here in the chat. So Ward is asking, can you please ask Martin what the process will be to get a jelly bean bag that includes our own best selected variety?
You have only to ask and to be patient, because we're just constructing our jelly bean bags this year for the first time. And right now, you can see by the pictures on the wall, this is not my university office. Our research program has been suspended for now, and we hope to get into our seed storage for to be able to construct our jelly bags. But I think we should have seed by 2021. And certainly 2022, we'll have large seeds. And then we're going to give you those jelly beans, and then we'll talk to you in 10 years. So yeah, thanks, Ward.
Okay, great. Thanks, Martin. Thanks so much for answering all the questions, and thank you to Allison and Jim. I'm very excited about this jelly bean project that's brewing. And maybe I'll just pause here and say thank you to everyone for joining this call about the PPB. And if anyone is interested in staying on, what we're going to do is if Jim, you're still good with the time, we'll pass it back over to you to kind of share some of the thoughts that you shared with me yesterday to share with the farmers. I'm going to have to hop off at 11:30 because I have another call that I need to get on, but I'll pass on the facilitation to Abir. But I welcome anyone who has to go right now. You can do that, and we'll say goodbye. But anyone who'd like to stay on, you are welcome to stay. Oh, and if anyone's leaving, I'll just let you know that in terms of follow-up, we will get the PDF from Martin and we'll send that out. And so and if there's any other questions or follow-ups, you can direct those to me and we can follow up on them. But okay, now I can pass it off to Jim.
Hi there, does that work again?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I was just hoping to go to the next screen here. Sorry, how do I get to the next sharing the screen?
If you can see the Zoom call right now, like if you can see all of our faces, if you move your mouse to the bottom of the screen, you'll see share screen.
Oh, here we go. No, you know what? I'm just going to skip it. It's only one page anyway. Let me just start by saying thanks for the opportunity to start a conversation. I've only just been thinking about it recently, but I thought with all the expertise in the room, if we could put it that way, keeping our physical distance impeccably, that having a little discussion on COVID might be useful in all of our local jurisdictions. And I think I'd like to just start out by, and it's a huge jump from breeding, making wheat crosses and selecting them and so on, to recognizing the magnitude of the current problem that we have and how big the problem is likely to get. And I don't mean to be alarmist, and I think we've all seen the news and we know that the news is going to continue to be bad. The current projections in Canada and U.S. and Mexico are likely to get far worse. So the issue is to, what can we do given that agriculture is likely to be on the in the crosshairs on some of this. So the current prospects are for Canada are one thing. The prospects for the U.S. and Mexico are likely to be far worse from a public health standpoint from what we gather. And the implications for food production and distribution and inputs are what's crucial from our standpoint. Now, in terms of Canada, and this will vary widely across the country, of course, the issue of access to foreign workers and foreign workers' ability to come for harvesting, for example, is a huge issue, and one that's going to be quite difficult to address, I believe. You've all faced probably constraints on inputs not just the physical ability to get them, but in person, but also just their availability. How much that will change in terms of seed and so on as we progress, I just don't know. In terms of markets, I mean, obviously our market's very different from all of yours. Many of you will just feed into an existing marketing stream, and for all of you people, I mean, the issue is probably, how can you do what you're already doing very well, even better, and that's great. But for others, the restaurant market, for example, has just fallen off a cliff in Vancouver. I was visited by a person 2 days ago who was driving around 2 farms because his mushroom business had gone from 100% supplying of restaurants to 0 overnight. So he's setting up well, I'll come to some of the constructive, practical measures that people are thinking about. But the other thing I'd like to mention, I think this might come as a bit of a shock to us because we're so used to open trade, particularly in agricultural products. Now, I mean, we've had issues cross-border trades in terms of wheat in the past and so on, but I'm thinking more the other way around from a domestic standpoint. I think, I'm certainly no expert, but in terms of the wheat trade, I'd be surprised if that had huge issues to it. But again, I defer to other expertise on that. But what I think is we need to put our mind to is what happens if the borders become more rigid. I noticed in the latest edition of the Western Producer, Russia has started to hoard its buckwheat crop, for example. And so I say, okay, what else will be hoarded? There are stories out of early this morning, I didn't check, and late last night, that the United States government is asking the manufacturers of face masks to not export them to other countries, but to keep them into the United States. Well, this raises other issues like what else will countries like the United States and others restrict? And of course, this is, although we may not be focused on grain here, things like rice come to mind. I mean, if significant amounts of rice are being produced in California, I don't think it's a leap to say that there will be proponents within the United States of restricting that rice production for first use in the United States. And so how that affects not just Canada but other countries is an open issue. What will the rice exports be from Asia and India? I mean, it's anybody's guess, I think, at this point, because if you're facing a public health catastrophe as a country, your first thought is not to export your staple food. So that has made us here in Agassiz revise our plans for the growing season, and in fact to try and to grow more hulless oats as a substitute for rice. Now, this is a spit in the ocean, really, in the overall scheme of things. But I throw it out there as a way of trying to relieve some of the vulnerabilities. And some of you may have connections to other networks where these sorts of questions can start being asked in a serious fashion. Fruits and vegetables, of course, are also an issue here in Canada. And we've spent time on our farm renovating an old greenhouse that we used to use for vegetable production, so that we can produce starts for other people to grow in their home gardens, just in our community. I mean, those are simple steps, but I think that we all need to look at whatever we can do in our jurisdictions to look towards solutions. Now, in terms of practical measures, I mentioned the gentleman who came by with his mushroom business. He's actually establishing, and it has been established, a delivery service to replace the restaurant market business. So he's soliciting crops from other farms. Now, obviously, we're quite diversified here, but other places, Nova Scotia and Ontario and Quebec and so on, they'll have diversified crops within a particular area. So that's a model, and they'd all do it safely with drop-off points and so on. that has the potential to relieve some of the stress internally. The city of Victoria, and understand, just passed a provision whereby the city's greenhouses, which to try and use some of that land, which is already equipped with irrigation infrastructure, to use that again, maybe to incorporate some of the young agrarians who are desperately looking for land, which is huge, very expensive here, as a way in to start growing real food. But the underlying point in all of this is the need for cooperation and collective wisdom. So, you know, I don't have much more to offer beyond that, other than to open it up for people to think about and to comment in their own spheres, because I know many of you people have networks that are very practical minded and very very wise and have the ability to get real things done quite quickly. So I'll leave it at that for now and turn it back to you folk, and so I'll go back on mute. So thank you very much, and appreciate any of the efforts you're able to do.
Thank you so much for sharing these thoughts with the group, Jim. If folks are still willing to kind of stay on the call and honor this conversation, you know, it's an open floor, so please feel free to share your thoughts.
Hello, it's Charles here. I started a wheat mill yesterday. I had a wheat mill given to me by my father years ago, and haven't used it for a while. Was collecting dust, so I started it, and we made some bread. And then I'm thinking, well, maybe somebody else will eventually be needing flour. We don't know, so that might be coming handy. But it's just a thought for this situation with their society now that we may eventually need those things locally. So we'll keep our fingers crossed it doesn't get that bad. But I see some of the old things are going to come in handy, even for ourselves. Thank you.
Hey, Jim, that was a great conversation starter there. I know we work closely with some bakeries in Saskatoon, supplying them with grain, and I've been in touch with them, and they've done a lot of stuff moving online for online ordering, kind of like what you mentioned as well, where people will place their orders and then they'll come and just pick them up at the door. I know, practically speaking, unless you're in the city, that doesn't really help, but it's one option. The other option is too, I'm a director on the Canadian Organic Growers Organization. I hope you've heard of them, but we're working on building a network of organic producers to kind of facilitate these kinds of exchanges too. So I would also encourage you to contact Wayne Adams, who's the executive director of COG, and you can I can either email you his info or you can find it on the website, and definitely have a conversation with him about it. And I know that we're very interested in helping to facilitate these kinds of relationships between producers.
Great. Thank you very much, Allison. Really appreciate that.
For folks looking to move stuff online, another option to look at is Open Food Network. It's an open source community that's actually global, and in Canada here, it's run out of Waterloo region, but they're across Canada, and we're using them in the Ottawa region to get a bunch of farms working collectively online, and they've just said today actually that they're going to waive their fees for setting folks up online until I think it's the end of June. So it's one option for you.
Are there any more thoughts or ideas that folks would want to share on this topic?
It's Martin here. I just want to say how much I appreciate Jim's perspective and, you know, stepping forward and just alerting us to this and you know, look at what we've learned already. You know, Charles, Allison, and whoever talked about the Open Food Network, you know, just, you know, taught me three interesting new perspectives. So thank you. I think we should continue to talk about this. And when I think about, you know, who I can turn to in my circles for knowledge and advice and guidance on this, and, you know, how to educate our students, because I'm at the university, the group of people that's on this call is, you know, probably one of the few that I can turn to that have some experience and have thought about this. So I appreciate it.
I wouldn't mind just mentioning Farm Folk, City Folk just did finish doing a farmer survey of a whole lot of farmers, and I'm happy to share that. Maybe I can put a link up or something of that survey. I think over 120 farmers filled it out in British Columbia, and it's directly related to the response to what's going on.
David, that would be excellent if you could share that. I'd really appreciate that. We're about to send out our own farmer survey this afternoon, actually, on some of these topics.
Okay, yeah, great.
Particularly around sort of labor shortages, market closures, and online options. Those are the three areas we're focusing on as far as how farmers have been affected by COVID-19. So yeah, if you could share that, we'd be really interested in sharing our results from here as well.
Ian here again. Couple of comments. Apparently the supply, my wife's been looking for seeds for the garden. We want to expand our garden a bit, our home garden for this year, and some of the seed suppliers are finding they're selling out of certain types of seeds, certain varieties, and I think there's quite a strong uptick in people wanting to grow their own food, you know, on the off chance that some things are obviously going to hard to get this summer or this year. A lot of labor shortages in horticulture and fruit industries are going to make it difficult to supply Canadian products because they were so dependent. You know, most of the horticultural industries were very dependent on temporary foreign workers or seasonal workers who would come in. The honey producers are in the same boat. A lot of people relying on, a lot of those businesses rely on temporary foreign workers to do what is a very labor intensive job. So we've kind of thought about, well, what are some of the opportunities we could do here since we've got access to land, and you know, we've done some small projects over the years of doing sweet corn and you know, and also sold a few things in the farmers market. It's a huge job, but there, you know, if you're in a position to provide some tools and equipment and land, there are probably who might be interested in trying to even outside of your own family in the community who may be interested in trying to take on a project and try and produce some food for the local market. I mean, it's incredibly hard work and difficult work, and you know, I'm not sure you make a lot of money, but it is possible to grow a lot of food here on the prairies and elsewhere. And I think it's something we should be thinking about, not only in this particular crisis, but I mean, obviously in the long run, trying to supply local markets and have our own security of food supply is very, very important for the future as well. So yeah, it's interesting times. It's very difficult as a large scale producer to imagine what's going to happen in the next 6 months or a year in terms of the market for our products, but it's certainly something that we are thinking about and trying to figure out, you know, what are we going to do if suddenly demand for a lot of grains or products that we grow fall off the, if the demand falls apart or the transportation system falls apart. And so far, it's actually the reverse has happened in a way, in that the demand for some organic products has actually risen as people stockpile food. So a lot of question marks and a lot of, thoughts about what's going to happen, but there are no easy answers at this point.
Well, if there's, I mean, geez, good luck to everybody trying to solve this situation over a video conference call. Jim, thanks for your courage and your thoughtfulness and kind of taking the time to share these thoughts with the group. It's on all of our minds, and it's really not something that we're going to be able to solve right now. But yeah, like Martin said, there's already been so many fantastic ideas that have been shared. So, let's hope that this is an opportunity for all of us to kind of rethink how we're valuing the work of the food system, how we're valuing the work that all the farmers that are on this call and beyond are doing, and how we can rethink how to manage all the vulnerabilities that are in the system as well. It's so inspiring to see farmers that were on this call today, to hear about the work that you guys are doing, especially Martin, as always, and Jim and Allison for sharing the work with the team. I'm sure we'll get an update from Iris in terms of when the next call will be, and thank you all for the work that you're doing, and good luck for the rest of this season. And hopefully there'll be a few follow-ups that we can include for folks on how to get in touch with groups or organizations that are organizing and facilitating conversations around how to act on COVID. I'm not in charge of the call. I think Tiara is. But I think if folks want to kind of continue the conversation, it can happen in other forums. But otherwise, I think we'll have to say goodbye to folks today. And thank you again for your time.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone. Good luck with the season.